that feeling? You know that initial impression when you're starting a new habit, you just decided to change your life. A part of you is really excited and pumped to get started. You see all the possibilities in front of you, but then like a Mack truck coming out of nowhere, the old you comes screaming out of left field. In your old ways, your dreams, the goals and everything you had dies before it even has a chance to take its first steps.
頑張りたまえ。根拠はないが、ひょっとしたらまだ死ぬには。ってあら、走馬灯がダメじゃん。
Let's see what we can do to take off, stay on our good habits, and start creating the life we deserve. Welcome to Operation Goose Rocket Week 1, and I'm your host, Onion Yabor. This is the Onion Yabor Raising Project. I help creatives, authors, and anyone with a vision level up and live the dream. If you follow me on my level up journey, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and like the video for more content like this. It really helps me out, and I'm trying to go and reach level 9,000! And yeah, just in generally grow. So please help me out. Hit the like button. It helps out a lot. Today, I wanted to talk about starting new habits. Whether it comes to that feeling we have to just keep the momentum of standards we have inherited from others, or, worse yet, really bad habits. I'm fortunate enough that I pretty much lived the life I set out to live 2 years ago. I'm more or less on the way up. I'm nowhere near what I can be or who I can become, but I will say I'm proud of the direction I'm headed. For this video, there were a lot of things I felt that really helped me get here, but I like working in divine numbers, and so when I boil down the principles that help me start and implement new habits, whether it's working on my business, or writing and getting my books out, or just plain working out, I've seen the process can be really started with 3 foundational principles. Starting with the big picture, committing to foundational habits, and less is more. So starting with the big picture, it's really important to know what it is you're trying to accomplish. Why are you even trying to implement these habits to begin with? What fundamental changes are you wanting to see? To do this, we first need to take an inventory of our lives as it stands right now. And from there, we can pick our direction, right, based off the destination we want to go to. Now, something that's really important is personal accountability. You aren't going to get ahead if you're constantly blaming people for your own position and where you're at. If you're young, this can be a natural reaction, especially if you don't like where you are, because let's not play around. Parents have a big impact on the initial direction of our life, and if that's not very favorable or you don't like what you've gotten, it can be really easy to blame them. But ultimately, we have to look at what it is we can do. And as time goes on, the more time that goes on, the more your life is going to be indicative of who you are and the habits and character you've accumulated. When you are deciding to change your life, you're not only saying, I want to see something different around me, you're also saying to yourself that you want to see a different version of me, yourself. Scientifically, it's possible to change yourself. It's just not easy, and it takes a buttload of energy. So in starting with the big picture, we have to identify who we want to be and the life we want to live. And the first part of that is first figuring out who we are and what is the life we're living now. Be practical. Use are simply your actions, and those are dictated by your habits. So here's a little exercise I think can really help you out. Okay, so here we're going to talk about the priorities and how we actually use our time, right? So when I was taking an honest look at what I was doing with my time, this was, a few months ago, I realized I spent a lot of my time in bed. Then the second most amount of time I was using was on YouTube. Like, I'd spend probably like 5-6 hours a day just watching videos on YouTube trying to distract myself. After that, I'd spend maybe 1 or 2 hours either spending time with people, if that. I actually spent a lot of time alone, or trying to spend time with people, so reaching out, things like that. And then I would work, but I realized I wasn't consistent necessarily working every day, and I wasn't putting in the hours like I needed to. And then you see that with writing, cleaning, and then eating and taking care of myself. These were really low on the priority list. So when my pyramid, you look at it, the foundation of that became basically staying in bed here at the bottom. And then after that, on that hierarchy, I was watching YouTube videos. And then after that, you could call it relationships, I suppose. And then here you have work. And here you have writing. And then after that, cleaning. And then here, eating at the top. Now, this was my hierarchy of how I was actually living my life. This is not the hierarchy of someone who is healthy and going to own an animation studio and take over the world. That is not the pyramid of someone who's going to do that. This right now is not going to lead me where I need to go. Honest look about what I did with my time, the person I was in terms of how I lived, was not congruent with my dreams. So then had to ask myself, okay, what does someone who is going for that dream at the stage of life I'm in, what does their habits look like? The most important thing is he's making sure that he's living by divine principles, right? I have a very strong relationship with God and the divine, and that's the most important thing to me. Did that list for us right here in this card. So we see here that the divine is at the very bottom. Everything I do needs to either be helping me with my relationship with this or I don't do it. Above that, because obviously, like, I have to have my relationship with the divine, but then there's my relationship with my own health. And then I realized things like going outside, um, like listening to like good programming. This is Louise Hay, and doing coursework on myself, as well as working out, taking care of things. That was the second most important thing. To take a step back because when I ordered things like this, I noticed it wasn't quite working in terms of how I was distributing my time, and so making that same pyramid, I did divine and the health. That didn't change, right? Those were my number one and number two priorities. But then right after that, I said household and home relationships. I actually had to come to a place where I decided that YouTube was more important than that. Then YouTube became a higher priority because I realized that's what I wanted to do, which is why you're going to see more of these videos coming out. And then after that, it was making sure that my business was growing and that my clients were succeeding and doing well there within Prolific. And that was the most important thing after YouTube, right? Because YouTube will help me sort of teach my message and share, and teaching that message and getting it out there is really important. But then my business helps support that as well, obviously, because it allows me to live my life the way I do and, do it more. Then after that, my writing, which is sort of the fulcrum of my dream because I really like the writing, but that takes sort of a back seat to making sure that my YouTube and business succeed. But like a lot of that is making sure that I can do all of these things. So in terms of my actual time, writing is important and really sacred to me, but I can't put more time into my writing than I put into my business. And I can't put more time into my business than you do building my YouTube channel. Even though this is the thing though, when I build my YouTube, it supports my business. And when I do my business, it supports my writing. That's how you know you have good priorities because all these things will help support each other. And another thing that I want you to ask is the way I spend my time compatible with my other priorities? It's the more foundational values. If they're not supporting the higher values in terms of your time, you're going to experience cognitive dissonance. You have that idea or that feeling and sense that what you're doing and what you're seeing is not matching reality. It basically creates a place where you're not able to fully incorporate or sit into what's important to you because you have dissonance. You have feeling that what I want and what's important to me is different than what I'm seeing in my actions and in my day to day. So for instance, if you say that I love my family, but then every single day you see yourself treat them like crap, you're going to have cognitive dissonance. And in this cognitive dissonance, you're going to have a lot of issues appear because your values are not aligned with your actions. You guys know what a Matryoshka doll is? I hope I said that right. Those Russian stacking dolls for how you guys want to live and think about life, especially when you start having to have more freedom. Lower priorities can always fit into your higher priorities, but higher priorities won't be supported by lower priorities. So another example of this is the priorities jar. I was going to get a jar and do the whole sort of word thing in front of you guys, but I didn't want to do that. I was really tired. And so here's a video with that description to kind of tell you guys more about it. In the jar analogy, they talk about how you have to start with the rocks and then you go with the smaller pebbles, and then finally you put in the sand. And when you put them in that order, then everything can fit into the jar. And so it is with life. So you have to get down to the baseline. And the most foundational priority for me was my relationship with God, and then everything spanned from that. Now, I'm not saying that that needs to always be your value, but saying a value of self awareness and belief is important to know as your base in your life. Because if you don't have that, then that base is always going to be shifting. And when that base is always shifting, it's very difficult to build everything. So, for instance, if it's your family, ask yourself, is my time and energy spent in activities that benefit my family's needs? And is that holistic? Meaning, does it include everything? Now, everything doesn't have to be about family, but it's important to make sure that your values and priorities are reflected in how you spend your time. What are the habits that would best reflect each stage of my values and priorities? And then always make sure, in terms of how you're spending your time, whether it's work, whether it's family, whether it's relationships, make sure that your time is going in the same amount, the same level. Like the most foundational things are getting the most amount of time, and that everything else is building on top of those things. From learning, you need to align your values, you need to align your habits, and you need to make sure they line up. But once you identify what that is, how do you put yourself in a place to actually do that? And that's with the third step, where less is more. One of the most important things to decide is, once you know what your priorities and the bigger picture is you have to start implementing it, and you have to start realizing, before you start asking yourself, what is it I need to start doing? You've obviously identified some good habits, you identified some of the things you need to do, and you know what those foundational habits. But the most important thing is, before you do all that, you have to ask, what is it I'm going to stop doing? It might seem counterintuitive, but the reality is, the only reason you waste so much time is because you're bored and you have so many other options to distract yourself. But if you have a strict list of things you're not allowed to do, especially during certain times, you're going to see lots of responsibilities and things crop up. But eventually, if you build and adhere to your hell no list, the things that are most important to you are going to naturally rise to the top. Like a cork in the ocean. It's not that it needs more help to be lifted up, it's that the things that are holding it down need to be cut off. And so, really knowing where your no is and adhering to that is going to be the big way forward. So, for instance, for me, when I started wanting to read more and sleep better, I just made the decision that I wasn't allowed to have any electronics in my home, right? And not that they're not allowed in my home, but rather that I wasn't allowed to use them, right? And that if I wanted to use it, I would need to go outside. And then after a certain time, I wasn't allowed to touch them. So naturally, when I didn't have anything to waste my time with at home, in terms of like electronics and stuff, it forced me to get my work done outside of home, so that when I got home, I would relax and I would sleep more. So my sleep got better. And then, because I didn't have any electronics to mess around with and distract myself, all I had was books. So naturally, I started reading more. And so it became easy, because all the things that were getting in the way were just cut out, because I just made a hard no and I eliminated them from my life. Is understanding the Pareto principle, which basically, it's been found that 80% of results in life will typically result from about 20% of the actions. And it evolves into just about anything. If you think about it, about 80% of the books are sold by about 20% of the authors. 80% of movies, like, there's always the greater majority of things that typically succeed come from that more excellent. And so you see it also within your habits and in your life. That's why there's so much wealth disparity. But wealth disparity is like really more extreme. It's why like 1% of the population controls almost half the money. And so by making a decision that, no, I will not do these things, and eliminating that from your life, you instantly become part of that 20%. And that's where the 80 comes in. And using the Pareto principle, you essentially can find what are the habits and the things that are working with me, because 80% of my results are coming from 20% of my habits. So you can, if you can always define or figure out what those 20% habits are, and then you start focusing in on them, then your habits are going, the habits that you create and implement around those values, the results are going to expand from that. And from that expansion of the results, you're going to start living the life of your dreams. For anyone who's been wondering, I'll explain the next step in the Onion Yabor raising project, which is Operation Goose Rocket, of which we just started week 1. Now, beforehand, you should know if you found anything in this video helpful, please hit the like button, and it really helps the channel grow and helps me to make more content like this. And also hit subscribe while you're down there to join the channel for more content, and hit the notification bell to see my journey unfold. Now, the biggest thing you need to understand about Goose Rocket is my goal is to release videos every Monday and every Thursday, basically just from now on. So look out for those videos. And with Goose Rocket specifically, if you're a writer and you want to level up as an author and as a person, look for my masterclass on 3 reasons you're not making money with your writing, and book a time if you want to talk more on how I can help you level up. Now, let's talk about Goose Rocket. So I was reading through Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich about a month, and I realized I had made a list of goals about 4 years ago, and I hadn't done any of them. Now, there's some other goals that were supplementary to that I had accomplished, and so I've now been able to get into my business full time. Then, dated some cute girls in the interim, but there was this list of ambitious goals that for years I wasn't finishing it. And so part of the Onion Yabor raising project is the idea that I'm raising myself, raising my vibration, what have you, basically becoming a better version of myself. And I'm trying to be that example for others to see, because I think it's important, like growing up with that example or not really having it. And so part of that's what I'm trying to do here. And so where I implement these habits is I identified 3 core pillars for my career. And I, during that time, have decided that there are habits that I want to implement so that I can make that career and solidify those 3 pillars. And so that's what Operation Goose Rocket is all about, is that I have the 3 pillars are my business, the writing education platform, Prolific. I have obviously my books, I've released The Girl and the Beast and many more books to come. And third, but certainly not least, is YouTube, where you guys are watching this, is that I want to be a full-time YouTuber. And so as a result of that, I'm building up those 3 pillars and basically implementing the habits I need to make the career possible. And that's what Operation Goose Rocket is all about, is watching me hit milestones to implement those habits. And then after that, I'll finish it out, and then the Onion Yabor raising project will then move on to another operation, and then another operation, and so on and so forth. Now, you might ask, what specifically are those goals and those milestones? And that's what we're going to talk about next week, is how do we make goals and how do we actually put them out. So if you want to keep following me on my journey, I'll share the goals on what I decided and the difference between goals and habits, because today we just talked about habits and implementing them. But in the meantime, if you're bored, I did make a video on loneliness. It's not super great, if I'm being honest, in terms of its quality production, but I do like some of the things that are being said. So if you want to just pop it in your ears and listen to it while going to work, I think that's something you might enjoy. So check out that video on loneliness I just made. And next week on the Onion Yabor Raising Project, look for on how to make goals. Before you guys go, I have a really, really important question. And this one's really, really critical to understand. And it's probably the most important question that I'll ask you guys today. And that is, have you seen Top Gun Maverick?